Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar series. We're up to webinar number 2, the Introduction to Oxygen Forensics Keyscout. This webinar is presented by Matt Finnegan. He is product advocate and forensic expert at Oxygen Forensics. And I will be monitoring any questions that you have. Please put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll monitor that. Enjoy Matt's inspiring talk.
Thank you, Noor. Can I just check, Noor, that you can hear me and see the presentation on the screen?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see your presentation on the screen.
Perfect. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I'll give a quick introduction to myself. Apologies if you've heard this before in one of the other webinars, but I'll do it just in case there are some people that haven't been on the previous webinars. So like Noor said, I'm one of the digital forensics people at Oxygen. I've been at Oxygen for about 2 years. And then prior to that, I did digital forensics as a practitioner for sort of 13, 14 years. Started out in the UK military and then went to government agencies doing a mix really of mobile forensics, computer forensics, drone forensics, loads and loads of different kinds of digital forensics. So the topic for today is really just an introduction to the Keyscout tool, which is a tool that has been in Detective and is also now in the remote acquisition version of Detective Remote Explorer for quite a long time. The reason that I like to talk about this is that Keyscout is perhaps not that well known about. It's one of those kind of hidden gems that is included in those tools, but perhaps not everybody knows what they are or what it does, because it does have kind of a weird name, right? Keyscout, but it is actually the tool that we can use to do some integrated computer forensics in Oxygen Forensic Detective and Remote Explorer. So I'm just going to go on to the next slide, which is a bit of an agenda. So I'm going to talk about what actually is Keyscout and what it does, what its purpose is. Keyscout is an integrated computer triage and data extraction tool. A little bit of an introduction to KeyDiver, which is a relatively new tool or module as well that we have included with Detective and ORE. And then how we can leverage or use Keyscout and Detective or ORE to view data from multiple sources in one case and do the analysis of the computer data that you've collected with Keyscout. So, you know, most people know us as a mobile forensics company, and that's definitely the roots and the history of Oxygen Forensics. But for me, one of the key strengths of Oxygen Forensic Detective or Remote Explorer is actually that we can extract and or import, you know, a lot of different types of data sources. We're not just a mobile forensics tool anymore, and we haven't been for quite a long time. And that allows us to do things like unified analysis of multiple types of data, because, you know, in cases nowadays, you know, you may have mobile phones, you will almost always have mobile phones, and you might even have more than one of them. In fact, I think most cases today, it's going to be a minimum of, you know, 3 or 4 phones per person, and everybody has that box of phones that are, you know, the old phones. So there's going to be a lot of mobile phones in a case, but there's also going to be other stuff as well. You know, there could be computers or laptops. There will probably, you know, be some data from the cloud. There could be downloaded accounts data, warrant returns. There could be vehicle data. There could be call data records from telecoms. Definitely one of the strengths of Detective is that you can have all of those different data sources in one place when you do the analysis. The way that we do that for computers in Detective and ORE is actually through the Keyscout tool, which is a part of those tools. So this is the homepage of Detective, just for anybody that might not have seen Oxygen Forensic Detective before. And you can see up at the top that we have some tools in Detective for extraction of data from mobile devices, cloud sources, but we also have this Keyscout tool, which is definitely a bit of a mystery, I think, when people first start to use Detective, because it doesn't really tell you what it does in the title of it. But this is the tool that we use to do collection of data from Windows, MacOS and Linux. There is a few different ways of launching Keyscout. For example, you can see here that you can add the Keyscout tool to removable media like a hard drive or a thumb drive, and I'll explain the reason for that as I go through the presentation. You can also launch Keyscout from here to acquire external drives. If you have a physical drive plugged into the workstation that you're using Detective on. And also under this import section where we have the ability to import lots of different types of data, there's also this desktop data import section as well for Windows, macOS and Linux data. And that option will also launch Keyscout. So these are all different ways of launching and using Keyscout from within Detective. So like I said before, Keyscout is actually included in Detective or Remote Explorer. This is not a separate tool. It's not an add-on. If you already have a Detective license or Remote Explorer license, you already have Keyscout. But we do see that maybe not everybody knows about it. Maybe not everybody is using it. And like I said before, it is for targeted collections from Windows, macOS, and Linux. We did actually in version 17 of Detective and version 1.6 of ORE, which were the most recent versions, we did also add the ability to create full disk images for Windows only, but generally speaking, it is usually seen as a targeted collection tool. Now, originally, it was a tool to collect credentials for cloud extractions. And as I'm sure that you know, Detective has a really, really good cloud extractor. You know, a lot of supported services. It's quite stable. It's, you know, the cloud extractor in Detective has always been one of the kind of jewels in the crown, if you like, one of the key parts of Detective. But as we know, people quite often have credentials for those cloud services saved in you know, web browsers or in desktop versions of those different applications. So originally Keyscout was created as a tool that could run on those laptops or computers to collect credentials that we could use with the cloud extractor, whether they are, you know, tokens from WhatsApp desktop or Telegram desktop, or it might be, you know, usernames and passwords that people have saved inside their browsers. And actually, this is a really powerful use for Keyscout. Even if you only use Keyscout to do the credential collection, that can be a really, really powerful use of Keyscout alone. And actually, there is a major agency in the UK that actually pretty much only uses Keyscout to collect credentials on scene, because it is quite fast at doing that. And interestingly, we were in France a few months ago, and somebody told us an interesting story about a murder case that they'd worked on, where the phone had been, you know, thrown into a river and washed away. The phone was never, you know, able to be investigated. But they did have a laptop and the cloud extractor, and they used Keyscout to collect some credentials from the laptop that they could then do a Google cloud extraction from, and all of the guys' sort of search history and a lot of the web browsing history and things like that had actually been synced up to the Google Cloud, and there was some really, really incriminating stuff in there. So even if we just use Keyscout for the traditional credential collection use case from computers, it can be a really, really powerful tool. But actually, Keyscout collects much, much more than just credentials now. You know, over the years, it's been really, really heavily developed, and it continues to be really heavily developed. Every update of Detective or Remote Explorer normally has at least 10, you know, updates to Keyscout as well. So now it also collects application and system artifacts. It also does some memory artifact collection and analysis. It also looks for mobile backups as well. It will do a scan of those computers to look for things like high suite backups or smart switch backups or iTunes backups, because, you know, sometimes having those backups, it's like having a bonus mobile phone for your investigation. It can do some file collection based on rules as well. And then we do the analysis of those collections in Detective, just in the same way that we would do the analysis of a mobile phone extraction or a cloud extraction. And I will show you what the Keyscout extractions actually look like in Detective as we go through this presentation. One of the tools that's been recently released into Detective, and it is also included as part of it, is another tool called KeyDiver, and that integrates quite well with Keyscout because it includes password recovery for things like BitLocker and FileVault and Veracrypt. So when you're using Keyscout, you can leverage or use KeyDiver as a part of that Keyscout process as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. So this is what Keyscout looks like when you open it up. And if you open it with one of those 3 different methods that I showed you in the detective homepage, it will open the same tool. It will just open it to different parts of the menu. But if you go back to new search, you can see the kind of 3 different ways of running Keyscout. So the top option is a live system search. And the idea is that if you put Keyscout onto removable media, like an external hard drive, you can plug that into a live system and just do a live kind of logical data collection. Now, this has some use cases if you're out in the field, or even if you have a number of different people working, potentially going out into the field. You can put Keyscout onto as many external hard drives as you like. Keyscout does not need a license to actually do the collection. You do need a license of detective to view the data afterwards. But you could just have a hard drive in your kind of field kit that has the Keyscout executables for Windows, MacOS and Linux on it to be able to run that live. I actually found the live system search to be particularly useful for things like MacBooks. MacBooks for me, I didn't used to see many MacBooks, but whenever I would open a bag and there would be a MacBook inside it, I would, my heart would sink, because doing physical imaging of MacBooks, there are tools out there to do it, but it is still, a difficult process. So sometimes if a system is still switched on, or if it's a tricky system like a MacBook, it can be easier sometimes to do that live system collection. You can also use this in a more kind of lab-based setting. So if you have an image file, like an EO1 image or a DD image, but also lots of other image file formats. So the virtual machine image file formats like the MDKs, VDIs, VHDs, time machine backups from macOS, or even just file system archives. If you just have a zip of some files from a system that has been collected in a different way, you can also run Keyscout kind of locally on your laptop with detective against those existing image files, and also physical disks as well. So if you have a physical disk plugged into your forensic computer, through a write blocker or just plugged in, you can run a Keyscout search against those physical drives as well. So you have some flexibility in how you collect this data. And the way that Keyscout works is I always kind of struggle to describe whether, Keyscout, is it a full computer forensics analysis tool? Is it a triage tool? I would say it sits somewhere in the middle. We did add the ability to create full disk images for Windows in the last version of Keyscout, but generally speaking, most people use Keyscout to do a search, kind of like a triage search, based on these customizable profiles. And this is an example of the profile configurator that you have within Keyscout, and you can create different profiles. There are some default profiles. So this is a default profile to collect, all of the application and system artifacts and passwords. There's another default profile that also collects all of the files that I found quite useful for doing logical collections from MacBooks. And you can create your own profiles. So, there's lots and lots of different options inside the profile configurator. One of the things that you can do is you can set search routes. You can choose, and there are some default search route options in here. We have, search everywhere. We have this optimal mode. You can create your own search routes if you just want to search, maybe inside a particular user profile or something like that. This really does help speed up the process. Doing a Keyscout search against a live system or an image file, if you're not collecting all of the files, if you're just going after the application and the system artifacts, which is what I use Keyscout for the most, if you just use the standard search routes, which are the routes that you would expect to find the useful system and user data, Keyscout can run in really just a few minutes. So it can be quite fast with these search routes. You can also exclude search routes if there are places that you're not allowed to look inside, or just places that should only be static system data. You also have the option of adding passwords into a search profile. This is quite useful actually, because Keyscout will try and decrypt certain encrypted artifacts. So for example, if somebody has a master password on Firefox, which means that the passwords inside Firefox will be encrypted, if you put a list of passwords in here that does include that master password, it will decrypt those encrypted passwords. One of the things I always used to do for Windows machines, which is quite good practice, is if you include the Windows or the Microsoft account password, it will also try and decrypt things that are encrypted with the Windows Data Protection API. You know, that's used by a few different applications and things like the Edge browser. So it's worth, if you do have a password list associated with that person or that case, add those into your Keyscout search profile as well, and it will try and decrypt various encrypted artifacts just by using the passwords that are in that list, and it will try each one of those passwords. You can also collect files with Keyscout. Now, to be totally honest, the way that I used Keyscout was more in the lab. And I would generally use a combination of like a full disk analysis tool, something like Xways is what I used to use. I love Xways to bit, fantastic tool. Brilliant if you're, looking at lots and lots of files on a disk, doing searches or maybe deleted file recovery. What I found that those tools were not the best at was collecting data from applications and system artifacts and displaying it in a nice way. So I tended to use Keyscout for application and system artifacts, and maybe a full disk analysis tool for looking at things like files and doing that kind of in-depth analysis work. But you can collect files with a Keyscout profile, and we do it based on rules. You can create a rule, and there is a profile to collect all of the files on a device. I use that for MacBooks quite often when I just wanted to get a full logical acquisition from MacBooks. But also, if you're using this as kind of more of a triage tool, potentially in the field, or possibly even in the lab, you can create these rules to collect files based on lots and lots of different criteria. So I've got an example rule here where it's just collecting files that have an extension, which is a picture, and maybe all of those files that match that rule that have been created in the last week. So you can actually stack these rules together. You can have sub rules for each individual rule, and there's lots of criteria. There's file extension, file content. I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but there's quite a lot of flexibility for collecting files. To me, this is where Keyscout really gets quite interesting, though, is the applications and the system artifacts settings. I said before that originally Keyscout was a tool to collect credentials from all of the different applications that it supports, and it actually supports it's somewhere between 85 and 90, depending on whether or not you're using it in Detective or Remote Explorer. Remote Explorer does have a couple of extra services. It does collect credentials from the services that you see here, but it also collects pretty much all of the other stuff. So for Discord, it will also collect the channels and the chats and the messages and things like that. The same for Facebook Messenger. The image viewers. It will collect the last images that people viewed. It supports torrent clients. It supports some cryptocurrency applications. It supports a lot of web browsers, email clients. Lots and lots of applications with useful data inside them. And Keyscout is a really useful way to parse that application data. And like I said before, also view that application data alongside data from mobile phones or cloud extractions, etc., etc. There are also a lot of supported system artifacts that it will collect and decode or parse the data from as well. And again, it's across 3 different operating systems. Again, there are many tools out there, and a lot of free tools that will collect data from system artifacts, whether it's the registry or prefetch in Windows, or bash history in Linux, or event logs in Windows. But there are so many different system artifacts and places that we can find useful system data that sometimes it is nice to have a tool that will collect a huge amount of that and also display it in kind of a unified way. And actually, I really like the way that Keyscout and Detective or Remote Explorer handle these system artifacts, and I will show you some of the timelining for system artifacts actually in Detective as I go through the presentation as well. So it's quite a rich set of system artifacts. You can also configure memory analysis inside Keyscout profiles. And if you're running this Keyscout profile live, and I will say that the memory analysis is only for Windows. So if you run Keyscout live, it will query the live Windows memory. But you can also tell Keyscout to create a memory dump, and then you can do analysis on the actual memory image afterwards. So you can do it live or against a memory image. There are a few different artifacts that it supports for memory analysis. Some of these are probably more relevant to things like incident response, if we're looking at things like network connections or process lists or loaded modules. But some of them are also really useful for general kind of more law enforcement investigations, things like BitLocker keys and Veracrypt keys, and that ties in quite nicely with the KeyDiver tool as well. So Keyscout, one of the things that I do really like about this is it does support BitLocker and Veracrypt natively. One of the problems that I always run into, I love Xways to bits, but when are they going to add BitLocker support, right? It was one of those times when I had a BitLocker drive, I would have to go and find the Encase dongle or one of the other tools that supported BitLocker. You can un-BitLocker things within Keyscout, and there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. So you can't really see it because there's a pop-up over here, but on this BitLocker search, which I did against my local machine as a live system search, you can see that the C drive is BitLockered. Sorry, the hard drive is BitLockered. But actually, because this laptop is booted, the C drive is unlocked and actually decrypted by Windows. But we also have another partition, which is the D drive, which is also BitLockered. Now, because this partition does not use the TPM chip, if we click here, it would give us some options to decrypt that partition. And actually, under the decryption methods, we have password, recovery key or recovery password, or just a raw encryption key. And we can just put those in if we have any one of those, and it will decrypt it. Or we can start a password recovery attack in KeyDiver. Now, if we were doing this against the system drive, which is also BitLockered, so we could click here and try and un-BitLocker the raw system drive, we would have a different set of options because my laptop does use a TPM chip. So if a device or if the BitLocker scheme uses TPM for that particular disk or partition, you won't have that ability to use a password. You will have to use a recovery key or an encryption key, and you won't have the ability to do password recovery. But you can still un-BitLocker that drive if you have a recovery key or an encryption key. So if we do actually try and do one of these password recovery attacks for a BitLockered or Veracrypted or even File Vault, if it isn't a T2 MacBook, KeyDiver will open up, and this is just a very quick kind of demonstration of what the KeyDiver tool looks like. It's a GPU accelerated password recovery tool, basically, with a number of supported encryption types. We've just added a few more actually in the last release, but one of those is BitLocker. So you can build attacks, you can do dictionary attacks or join attacks or brute force attacks, and then you can try and recover passwords for whatever it is that you're trying to decrypt within KeyDiver. And then you can take that password and put that password into Keyscout in the screen that I showed you in the previous slide and decrypt that partition and then be able to search inside it. Once you've done a search with Keyscout, and this was a search that I actually did against a Windows 11 virtual machine that I had running on my machine. Once that search is finished, it will give you a bit of a summary, and it will basically tell you what it's found. So it will give you a list of the different applications and artifacts that it's found data for. It will also tell you what passwords and tokens it was able to find. If you did choose to do file extraction, you'll have some information about that. You can see here it's actually also extracted some backups. I put some iTunes backups around this virtual machine, and it pulled those out as well, and you can choose to open those as separate extractions inside Detective. And the decrypted data relates to things that we need those passwords for. So this could be, you know, Firefox master password or Firefox saved password data, or Windows DPI API data, etc., etc. At this point, you can choose what you save. So this is, you know, a logical extraction. It's found 5 GB of relevant application or file data. And you can actually go into this applications and artifacts section and choose what bits of data you want to save into an extraction. You can also export extractions directly into Detective without saving it to a separate extraction. If you're doing this live, you know, using a hard drive and the portable version of Keyscout, you will probably, you know, use the save option. But if you're doing this in the lab, again, it's one of the things that we added in version 17 is the ability to just import the Keyscout data directly into Detective without having to save it as a separate extraction. This is the Detective interface, and this is an example of a Keyscout extraction loaded into Detective. So this is actually the Windows 11 VM that I had in the previous slides. And you can see that it's in this case with, you know, phones and CDR data and vehicle data and cloud data. And it looks very similar to a mobile phone extraction in Detective or any other type of extraction. So we can see that it's a desktop extraction from Windows, but we have those same categories of data. So we have, you know, messages, we have the files, we have contacts, accounts, and passwords. And then if we go down to applications, you can see the different applications that it's pulled data from. So quite a few web browsers, a couple of, you know, messaging applications just with a couple of messages in there that I put in there, but also all of these system artifacts as well. And I really actually want to show you how it deals with these system artifacts in a little bit more detail. I will actually go into Detective itself. So I've said this you know, a number of times. Getting computer data into Detective allows us to do analytics across multiple types of devices, and the case level analytics that we have in Detective are things like a case level search, a case level timeline, and also a case level social graph. And this is really powerful if you do it across you know, multiple devices or types of devices. I just have a screenshot here of the timeline within Detective. I think we have a really good timeline. This is a timeline across an entire case with lots of computers and mobile phones and vehicle and cloud and all sorts of data in this timeline. The UI mantra, or the UI kind of method in Detective, if you haven't seen it before, is that we normally have filters on the left-hand side, we have content in the middle, and we have details on the right hand side over here. And you can see on this timeline, actually, you know, up here we have data from a Keyscout extraction. So we have some Discord and Slack messages. And as we go further down, we then have data from a mobile phone extraction, some Gmail and Snapchat data. So you can view all of that data in a single place. This is just the timeline. This kind of multi-device analytic would apply to, you know, the social graph, which is our link analysis tool, the search, and a few of the other analytics as well. So at this point, I actually want to jump out of, I will take questions in a moment, but I would like to show you a little bit more of Keyscout in Detective. So the first thing that I want to do is just run through that process of doing a Keyscout extraction from start to finish. So I said before, you know, you have the option to put Keyscout onto removable media through this button here, and this will just put the executables onto a hard drive or a thumb drive or wherever you want to put them, and then you can run them on a different machine. You can also use this to import data directly from the supported image formats that you can see there. The easiest way to open Keyscout locally is probably just to choose this option here. So if I open up Keyscout from here, I'll give it a second to open up. And then it's opened it to this drive search option. But if I go back to new search, I have all the different options of live system, image, or drive. I'm just going to go on the live system search for now. what you didn't see in the presentation actually was this screen. So we also have this capture RAM option up here for Windows machines. We have capture disk image again for Windows machines. You can create RAW or EO1 disk images. And then we have these profiles down here that I talked about in the presentation, and you can create your own profiles as well. I'm just going to do a very quick scan, and I actually created a profile earlier, which was purely for WhatsApp. So if I go into that profile, the only thing that I have in there, if I go to the application data, is the WhatsApp application selected, just to do it very quickly and also give you an idea of the end-to-end process for actually using Keyscout. So if I do this search on my laptop, because I do have the WhatsApp desktop version from the Microsoft Store installed, it will be very, very fast because it's only looking for that WhatsApp data. So it will only take a couple of seconds. And this is actually the screen that has changed slightly from the presentation, because in version 17, we did add this export data directly button, or you can save that extraction to the disk and then open it in Detective at a later point. I only have the WhatsApp application artifact in this list of artifacts because that's the only one that I ran it against. But again, you can actually unselect artifacts and choose whether or not you want to actually save them into that extraction. So at this point, if I export that data directly to Detective, and we'll give it a moment, you can see that it's importing directly into Detective, and it will only take a second because there isn't that much there. And then if I open that extraction in Detective, it's a very, very basic extraction. My WhatsApp only has one contact in it, and there is only WhatsApp data here. But you can see that we have, files associated with WhatsApp, the messages, and actually if we go into the WhatsApp application down here, we can view those messages from desktop WhatsApp as well, as the chat bubble view or as a big long list of the messages. I did also do a more complete Keyscout extraction of my laptop earlier, which I did just before this call. It took about 5 minutes to run across my laptop, which is the laptop that I'm talking to you on here. I did the sort of standard applications and system artifacts and passwords and tokens, and this has a little bit more data on it. So actually, if I go into this search summary, you can see that I also have these system artifacts. I also have, more actual applications, things like Notepad. WhatsApp is obviously in there as well, mail and calendar, etc., etc. And also passwords, which I'm not going to show you because some of those are my passwords. Decrypted data. I didn't add any passwords into this, so actually it hasn't actually been able to decrypt Windows DP API. But if I did put my Microsoft credentials in here afterwards, which you can do by clicking on this enter password, it would decrypt the rest of the Windows DP API stuff as well. So if I just go back into Detective and kind of give you an example of a more complete Keyscout extraction than just the desktop one, just the WhatsApp one that I showed you there. And I really actually just want to show you this ability to create cases within Detective as well, because that's quite important to how we use Detective. You can see I've got this case called demo case, which is what you saw the screenshot of during the presentation. You can have pretty much as many cases as you like in a single Detective database. You can just create new ones with this new case button up at the top, and then you can actually just drag and drop extractions from one case into another case, or if they're in unassigned extractions, you can drag them into another case. And if we go on the case level overview, this is where we can do some of those case level analytics that will include cloud data, computer data, mobile phone data. So you saw the timeline inside the slides in the presentation, but we also have the social graph as well, which is our link analysis tool. And again, this will include the data from computers and the data from phones, the data from cloud extractions, kind of all in one place. So case level analytics, computer data, mobile phone data, really, really important. And I'm just going to go into the Keyscout extraction of a VM that I did a while back, actually, and I had some email activity inside that VM that you can see here. So there's quite a lot of mail and calendar activity, Discord. And like I said before, this is not just credentials. This is also the chats and the browser histories, and kind of lots and lots of different useful things. You know, for Notepad, it will show you the last Notepad things that people had open, or video viewers, it will show you the last videos, that images that they viewed. So lots and lots of interesting types of artifacts. It also supports Steam as well, so you know, gaming services and things like that. And actually, if I just go back for a moment and go into the accounts and passwords, because this is the traditional use for Keyscout, we can see that we've also got usernames and passwords, or you know, accounts and tokens for things like Discord and Slack and Google and etc., Telegram. And actually, if you just want to collect credentials with Keyscout, you can do that. You can limit it just to credentials, and you can also launch the cloud extractor directly from here with the Keyscout collected credentials pre-populated into the cloud extractor. The last thing that I want to show you, because it's something that I quite like, is actually the way that Keyscout handles system artifacts, or the detective analysis handles system artifacts. I said before that there are lots of sort of disparate system artifacts, and sometimes making sense of system artifacts can be quite difficult. What detective does when it analyzes computer data through Keyscout, it actually takes different system artifacts and it puts them into groups. So as an example, application traces, that could be, you know, Windows prefetch, it could be user assist, it could be, you know, a few different types of system artifacts. So if I go into application traces, for example, these are the things that we categorize as application traces. So we have, you know, data from installed software, AM cache, MUI cache, user assist, one of the most important ones, prefetch as well, probably one of the other most important ones, but it aggregates all of those system artifacts that could relate to application trace into one place. And actually, you can, if you go up to the top level and click on categories, you can just view it as kind of all data. So you know, you have all the user assist stuff, and then you have all whichever one this one is. But actually, we have an individual timeline for each of these system artifact categories. So if I go into the timeline for application trace, it just gives me a nice timeline of all those different system artifacts that could relate to application traces, which I found to be quite useful and quite well thought out within the analysis side of detective. And if I just go back, you know, we have those kind of categories for, you know, user activity. It could be user logons, it could be, you know, use speed, device history, network activity, event logs, etc., etc. So again, we can do a full timeline across things like network activity or event logs just by going to this timeline tab up at the top and clicking on categories, which will show you all of these different artifacts that are associated with that. And of course, if you want to, you can just do an individual timeline across the entire Keyscout extraction. So this is not at a case level, this is just this Keyscout extraction. But again, you will have the ability to filter on, you know, just things like application traces, or, you know, maybe you want application traces and Windows event logs, or particular types of Windows event logs, you know, if they relate to user logons or something like that. There's a lot of flexibility in how you timeline computer data within Detective. So that's kind of all I want to show you on Keyscout for now. So I will say thank you very much for listening to me. And if you have any questions at all, please put them in the chat.